Wanted to make a fun little video here off an exercise I did for my audience design consultancy, Culture Ops, where I build small audience profiles for the diaspora of U.S. Residents from each of the World Cup countries. And so now I'm going to give you fun fact about something I learned about each diaspora. So let's get started here. First of all, U.S. Mexicans. I don't know if this is a fun new fact, but they are by far the biggest foreign diaspora in the U.S. It's not even close. By themselves, they would be, I think, the 40th largest country in the world. South Africans, less likely than other African diasporas to feel identified with Pan-African issues. They tend to be much more about being South African. At least the immigrants here in the U.S. are. U.S. Koreans, one of the most Christian diasporas in the country, very heavily churched. U.S. Czechs have a rich history and tradition of institutions that help with mutual aid and very open to financial arrangements such as co-ops and cooperative finances in general. U.S. Canadians, a large portion of them actually split their time between Canada and warmer U.S. states like Florida. U.S. Bosnians, I think if not the largest, one of the largest segment of small business owners in St. Louis, Missouri. The Swiss, this is going to sound, I think, probably a little cliche and expected, but it just really is what it is. They are outdoor and alpine enthusiasts. The U.S. Qataris, I think they're the smallest diaspora out of all the World Cup groups, and most of them are not here to stay. They are more of a temporary group of students and professionals. U.S. Brazilians, it's just a huge segment. I didn't realize it's like almost 2 million people, and they're one of the most undercounted because they have historically high rates of being undocumented. I did not know that. U.S. Moroccans, you might not know, they are highly, highly multilingual just by nature because their country is highly multilingual, where it's very common for people to know Arabic, to know the Berber language, Amazigh, I think, or sorry if whoever, you can correct me. French, because of their colonizers, and then Spanish as well. U.S. Haitians, a really big pillar, almost you could say the backbone of the healthcare workforce in the East Coast. U.S. Scots, there's so many clubs and kind of institutions in place in the U.S. to the point where there's a lot of organized travel from Scottish descendants back to Scotland to reconnect with their Scottish heritage. So for the U.S., since they don't have a U.S. diaspora or whatever, I cheated and I just profiled American-born soccer fans to make a point that even if you took away foreign fans, which there's a ton of, soccer fandom in the U.S. would still be a very big community, 25 million people. And then if you add the foreigners, it's about 45 million, by the way. They skew very affluent, and they tend to, compared to all other sports fans, be really, really interested in foreign cultures. And also in women's sports, even among the men. Paraguayans, I don't know if you knew this, but they have a bilingual identity, and no, it's not Spanish and English, it's Spanish and Guarani, which is an indigenous language, which they, in contrast with a lot of other Latin American countries, have gone to pains to actually preserve. Australians have had a lot of influence in U.S. coffee culture. I didn't know that, but they invented the flat white and a lot of came up with a lot of the cafe kind of culture that has slowly seeped into how the U.S. approaches coffee. U.S. Turks, very proud of their country's robust TV industry. Turkish TV dramas are incredibly popular, not just among Turks here, but Latino communities in the U.S. and other nationalities. U.S. Germans, if you don't count just first and second generation, but broaden it to the whole halo, I think they are in competition with Mexicans of being just the largest ethnic group, nationally identified ethnic group in the U.S. U.S. Curaçaoans, they definitely punch above their weight when it comes to producing MLB players, like Andrew Jones is probably the most popular, the most famous one. Um, they're very proud of their impact on U.S. baseball. U.S. Ecuadorians incredibly concentrated in New York City to the point where they make a great kind of test audience for any kind of urban or transportation innovation or anything where you're thinking about urban audiences. U.S. Ivorians, very high, big consumers, over index in kind of social events, throwing events, putting events for people, being generous, and kind of throwing celebrations for others apparently is a big way to attain status among that community. US Dutch, even among the recent immigrants, first and second generation, they tend to have near English fluency. US Japanese, one of the older diasporas, with over a quarter of people being 65 plus. Swedes, um, I mean, this might also seem a little bit cliche, but really, really, honestly, like culturally, very much like an outdoor stewardship type of culture with a lot of conscientiousness for the environment. U.S. Tunisians, they are among the most secular Arab or North African diaspora here, and very, very highly educated in STEM. U.S. Belgians, very, very much involved in EU institutions, diplomacy, and a lot of them tend to come here through jobs like that. So they are definitely Eurocrats, which is a term I find very funny. U.S. Egyptians, also very proud of their media, of the media that comes out of their country, especially TV shows geared around the moment that you break the fast during Ramadan and getting together with family during Ramadan to watch shows. U.S. Iranians, a really important part of Los Angeles to the point that they nicknamed the city Tehrangeles. U.S. Kiwis from New Zealand, incredibly overrepresented in Hollywood and in entertainment fields, creative fields in general. U.S. Spaniards of Hispanic diasporas, they're the least dependent on in language communications because they have the highest range of English fluency. U.S. Cape Verdean is one of the longest standing African origin U.S. groups in the U.S. A lot of them, most of them live in New England, and that community dates back to the 1800s. U.S. Uruguayans are a very quote unquote nostalgic culture in that they have an actual night, like an event geared around nostalgia. U.S. Saudis, among other things that they've been emphasizing, is they're very big into gaming and esports, and that's something that their government has made a lot of investment in. U.S. French, one of the diasporas with the most developed institutions in this country in terms of schools and lycées to educate their kids in the culture and in the language. U.S. Senegalese have a robust practice of mutual aid, usually through religious institutions. U.S. Norwegians, like their Swedish neighbors, are also hold outdoor life and environmental stewardship as a huge value. U.S. Iraqis are actually majority Christian in the U.S., which is kind of like the opposite of Iraqis in Iraq itself. U.S. Argentines are, or maybe the Latino country that's most open to therapy. They have the highest rate of people practicing therapy and of therapists themselves. U.S. Algerians are francophones, but as opposed to Morocco and other North African countries, they are a little bit more torn about their French roots because they had a brutal um, independence war against them. U.S. Austrians stand out for their high rates of participation in, let's call it, high classical art and music genres and institutions. U.S. Jordanians, high rate of small business ownership, more likely than the average American to start a business. U.S. Portuguese, long-standing diaspora and European diaspora in the U.S., very concentrated in New England and more likely than other European diasporas to engage in skilled trades, blue collar work. Democratic Republic Congolese, as opposed to the other country with Congo in the name, have a robust MBA pipeline, but also are kind of divided between more established professionals who have been here for a while and then recent refugees. US Colombians, of which I am one, we have grown threefold since the year 2000 and are now, I can't remember, but like probably one of the top five, top 10 largest diasporas in the US and the second largest in Miami, for example. US Uzbeks, one of the most important segments of trucking and logistics in the country and certainly in the Northeast. US English are more likely to bond with each other over shared interests than over um, cultural identification with being English. Um, U.S. Croatians have cultural institutions in the U.S. that are over 100 years old. U.S. Panamanians are more likely than other diasporas to have some tie to working with the military or working with U.S. government institutions. It's a legacy from having the Panama Canal, and a lot of the families that ended up here came here through working with the U.S. military and managing the canal, and then branched off to other things. U.S. Ghanaians are another diaspora which has is very overrepresented in the healthcare workforce. There it is. That's those are fun facts about each diaspora. Hope you enjoyed this video.